And welcome to the first Reigns on the Cardinals podcast for 2025. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns, STLSportspage.com. I noticed something in the intro video that I've never noticed before.
And what was that?
You're taller than Ozzie Smith.
He is kind of short, yes.
He'll play shortstop.
He very well, too.
He's going to be one of the people that'll be honored at the St. Louis Baseball Writers Dinner coming up on Sunday night down at the Missouri Athletic Club. Well, as we sit here for the first podcast of 2025, as we mentioned, we didn't do one, obviously over Christmas and New Year's. The problem is, as we sit here on January the 14th recording this thing, we're in the exact same position with the Cardinals as we were in October, as we were in November, and as we were in December. I feel like I'm living in Groundhog Day.
There's a lot to talk about and not a lot to talk about at the same time.
Wow.
But news for anyone that hasn't paid attention, you didn't miss anything over the last 3 months.
If you were hibernating and you were in that cave and you're just reemerging and you're going to see your shadow here on February 2nd, you haven't missed. I think you could make a case that the best thing that's happened to the Cardinals this winter is being awarded the 5th spot in the amateur draft coming up in July through the lottery. They moved up from 13th to 5th. They haven't signed a free agent. They haven't made a trade. They have only picked up a couple of pitchers through waiver claims to add them to the 40-man roster, and Nolan Arenado is still a Cardinal.
And the other thing you could say, too, is as you look at the competition, right, because you need to compare yourself to the National League Central, the Cubs really haven't done a whole lot other than add Kyle Tucker, which is a really good player and is going to help them a lot. Don't get me wrong. And the Reds have added a couple guys. Other than that, there hasn't
Milwaukee made a couple trades. Of course, they traded Devon Williams, which is, St. Louis, and is probably something going to hurt them a little bit.
For sure. But, it's a way of looking at it by saying, well, they haven't done a whole lot yet either. But again, the question mark becomes Arenado.
And the question mark becomes when we actually do have some breaking news here. Our producer's got a new graphic here ready, Cardinal breaking news. And this is the kind of the winter it's been for the Cardinals is this qualifies as breaking news. We have the report dates for spring training. The just announced by Major League Baseball on Tuesday afternoon, February 12th. The Cardinals' first workout for pitchers and catchers in Jupiter. February 17th, the first workout for a full squad workout. February 22nd, of course, the first full game. So just a little over a month from today, Cardinals will be on the field in Jupiter. What happens to Nolan Arenado before that?
I think you could safely make this prediction. One of either Nolan Arenado or Ryan Helsley will not be there when spring training starts. I don't know which one it'll be because as you look at it right now, you're noticing a lot of teams that don't have a lot of interest in Nolan Arenado. Is that because the Cardinals' asking price is too high, or is that because they're focused on Alex Bregman and trying to sign a free agent as opposed to a trade?
Why do you think Bregman hasn't signed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question mark. Is he asking for too much, or?
I mean, a couple of the reported offers that you've seen from Toronto and maybe Detroit, I mean, they're pretty substantial offers.
Is he a Boris guy?
We know what Houston, I think he is. You know what Houston offered him before they, excuse me, we're going to make the Arenado trade. It's surprising to me. He and Pete Alonso right now, the two biggest free agents they haven't signed. Of course, I don't think Alonso's market has anything to do with the Arenado talk, but yeah, you got to get those guys signed. I think everybody wants to know where they're going before you get to spring training. You start planning your club.
You've probably got about 2 to 3 weeks here that things are going to happen, right? Because you want it done before you get there. And as you get closer to spring training, it's not to say that moves can't happen, but people would like to know where they're going to stay or where they're going to go.
It's been reported that some of the clubs that had interest in Arenado, Boston being the first and foremost that everybody kind of thought would be a good fit, hasn't happened. I'm just wondering if you get closer to spring training, he's still a Cardinal at that point. Does some other club out of the blue step up and say, hey, we'll make that trade if you do X, Y, Z as far as picking up part of the contract?
And the other thing that's going to happen at some point, right, is there's going to be injuries. Now, is that in spring training? Is that later in the year? Is there a situation with, like the Phillies when the guy tore his ACL?
Yeah, Bone, right?
No, I can't think of his name. He played first base, and then
Hoskins.
When Rhys Hoskins tore his ACL and they moved Harper to first base, they didn't have to make a trade. Well, if something happens similar to that here, maybe then Arenado makes sense for somebody that didn't make sense a while ago. But again, if the Cardinals want to do this
going to get screwed up if Arenado is here.
And I think the other question mark becomes, is Nolan Arenado getting a chip on his shoulder because none of these teams kind of want him? And does a fired up Nolan Arenado then excite you if he is here because maybe he plays with a little more passion than he played with last year?
You have always said that it's a good Nolan Arenado makes the Cardinals a better club. But we just don't know what – I mean, I think it's interesting that the winter warm-up is coming up this weekend. He is not on the list of players that's supposed to be here. And almost everybody else on the club is. It doesn't surprise me that he's not on the list to come because obviously they didn't think he would still be a Cardinal at this point. But what kind of message does that send that he's not here? If he is on the team.
It sends a message of, one, the fans look at it as maybe he doesn't care, right? And when you look at Arenado the first half of last year, he was making errors in the field. He was jogging to first base. He just looked like he didn't want to be here. And if that's the Arenado that we have, I don't think any of us want him. I think we would rather see, Gorman play third or Thomas Sajaci play third. I think we'd rather see the kids that want to be here because you're going to get more out of that. But again, if it's the Arenado that's a MVP caliber and a platinum glove winner, I don't think any of us are sad that he's here, but it's just, again,
the problem is there's no way to know. There's no way to predict what's going to happen. And I think that's probably part of the reason why other clubs have been so reluctant to, even if you take out the salary equation, even if you say, okay, the amount of money that the Cardinals are willing to pay down the contract, combined with the money that the Rockies are still paying down that contract the next couple of years, the salary becomes reasonable for a player of Nolan Arenado's caliber, if he's the Nolan Arenado of the past few years. I think the problem is nobody knows what to expect. Nobody knows what he's going to do.
If you're Mo and Ollie and the rest of this coaching staff trying to put forth a game plan for this 2025 season, are you putting together two plans right now, one with Arenado and one without? Or how are you
have to be?
How are you planning that?
Good luck to whoever's planning spring training for the on the coaching staff. Should mention, of course, that all of our podcasts here, all the ones we got through the earlier in the off season with Mike, and the ones we'll be doing throughout the rest of the season, all totally cost-free, thanks to our sponsorships, the Drury Hotels, Archwell Health, AAA Travel in Missouri. We thank all of them for taking all of our content here on STL Sports page free and available to you. And a lot of Cardinal content, of course, coming up with the winter warm-up, and then as we head down to Jupiter and get spring training underway.
And, of course, you can get that content for our podcast anywhere that you listen to these, on Spotify or YouTube or, of course, our website, Amazon Music, anywhere. We want to make it easy for all of you to be able to listen anywhere that you are.
Speaking of the winter warm-up, I am most interested to see what John Mozeliak has to say. He's scheduled to meet with the media on Saturday morning, then scheduled to go out and have a Q&A for about an hour with the fans on the main stage of Ballpark Village. Might be interesting.
It might. I just hope that the tough questions are asked, and you will be in the room to ask those questions, because the questions that we're sitting here asking right now, and we want to find out is like, what is anyone interested? What's the plan? Or is something going to click in the next day and a half, and maybe all of a sudden you got something to cover and something to talk about?
I do know people, and our producer might be one of them, who thinks that the Cardinals are going to make a move in time for the winter warm-up, that they want to make a big splash at the warm-up. It may happen.
Well, right now they need to do something, because for the past 3 months we've done nothing, and they keep saying we're going to have this big reset. Well, if you looked at the team the way that it is right now, it goes back to a comment that Mo said right at the end of the season that said, well, this team may not look all that different.
Well, as right now, you've got 23 of the 26 players who ended the season will be on the roster. The only 3 who would not be here are Goldschmidt, who obviously was signed with the Yankees, and Kittredge, and who am I forgetting? There's another pitcher that left.
And it's good for Kittredge. I mean, we weren't going to pay him $10 million, and the Orioles did, so good for him to go there.
Oh, Gibson. I mean, Gibson and
Kyle Gibson will
Lynn.
Gibson
and Lynn, the other 2 guys aren't here yet. So 22 out of the 26.
And neither one of them have signed yet. So that's not to say they may not try to bring one of them back too.
And like you said, I mean, the problem with the 2 plans, Plan A and Plan B, with Arenado, without Arenado, is that there's been some indication and some comments from different observers that if the Cardinals think they're going to keep Arenado, they may look to shed. They still want to shed a little more payroll. They're going to look to the pitching staff. You picked Helsley. Obviously, he's the one guy the major guy that signed through the arbitration process, $8.2 million for that he's owed for 2025 at this point. There are 3 guys who didn't sign. We'll get to them in a minute. But I think the other 2 guys you look at is Matz and maybe Fetty, because I mean, I think you and I both, the first guy off the pitching staff that we would try to trade is Miles Michaels. But with that no trade clause, that's going to be tougher.
It's going to be tough for sure. And I think the thing about Helsley is now that he is signed and it's $8.2 million, I think that makes it easier to trade him now because they know what they're getting into. But pre-arbitration, when you try to trade him, you don't know how much he's going to want or ask for. And so now knowing that makes it easier. I'm against trading him because I think as rough as this starting pitching looks, you're going to need help in the bullpen. And you lost a key piece in Kittredge. And at some point, somebody's going to get hurt back there.
I think the thing that's holding up Helsley's conversations too, I think there's multiple factors why they, maybe not done anything there too. Number one is Arenado. Number two is you still have a lot of good quality free agent relief pitchers that haven't signed either. And so we saw one of them go to Philadelphia in the winter meetings. A club sitting there saying I can pay. And well, Hoffman just went to Toronto for 3 years and $30 million. I can just pay money and get a player like that, versus having to give up prospects to get a guy like Helsley for the same basic price.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, it all comes down to Arenado, and that's where it's just so hard to ask these questions because if they want to shed payroll, yes, you got to go to the starting pitching. And, when you talk about the winter warm-up, Sonny Gray was a guy that wasn't on that list either and was just added recently. So, do you want to read into that as like, was that trying to shed some money and do something and didn't fall through and now he's here, so.
And before anybody looks at the list and says, well, another guy that's not there is Nolan Gorman, what does that mean? Well, I can give you a really good reason why he's not going to be in St. Louis. He's in the Caribbean with his wife celebrating his honeymoon. He just got married on New Year's Eve in Phoenix. So he's got a reasonable excuse to not be present. But I think it's still a guy that the Cardinals obviously are counting on majorly in 2025, whether he's playing third base or not.
And I'm majorly counting on him to figure out how to not strike out 40% of the time.
That would be helpful.
He can come through and he can hit. I'm just not convinced that he can get rid of the strikeout rate. And if he can, more power to him.
I still don't see Gorman at 24 this year, I think. He's going to be 24. I just don't see him as one of those big three true outcome guys. I mean, home run, strikeout, walk. I think he's got more potential than that, especially from a doubles standpoint. Maybe not. And
he might, but we can sit here and talk about how poorly the Cardinals have handled the Jordan Walker situation, how poorly they've handled some minor leaguers. Mm-hmm. They've given him a legit shot, I think. Now, the first year, probably not. But last year, they gave him every opportunity that he could to be in the lineup and play, and it just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that he can't figure it out because, again, he is only 24 years old.
And that's one of my concerns with this club going into 2025. If they do truly go through this reset process, saying they're going to give the younger kids a chance to play. If Nolan Gorman struggles through April, if Jordan Walker struggles through April,
you can't send him down.
Victor Scott struggles through April, what's going to happen?
You can't send him down. You got to let him keep playing.
You got to let him keep playing no matter what happens. And I don't know that they have the guts to do that.
And there are perfect examples out there of guys like Jackson Merrill that had a really tough first half of the season.
The Churio, the kid in Milwaukee.
And Jackson Churio, same thing. Very tough first half of the season. All of a sudden turned it on and just went because they believed in him. They let him play and they figured it out. Now,
and they actually saw an example of that here with Mason Wynn. I mean, and not all in the 2024 season, but how he played in the final month of 2023 when 2024 began and the Cardinals said he's our starting shortstop. There were a lot of people who didn't know if he was ready for that job.
To me, I think the question really comes down to the hitting philosophy and the hitting coach of this team. And I have not been a fan of the way that they've handled some of their situations over the past few years because it seems like this team is only reliant on the home run. That's all they care about. They don't care about stealing bases. They don't care about small ball or getting guys over. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you take a guy like Jordan Walker and a guy like Nolan Gorman and try to change their hitting to only home runs, that's when you start to see the strikeouts go up because they're only focused on exit velocity and launch angle. And I think that's what's changing this game. If you let Nolan Gorman just go out there and hit and be himself and not, get out of his head, I think you're going to see a whole different Nolan Gorman. And the same with Jordan Walker. Because what happened when Walker went down to Memphis? He got it together and figured it out. Bring him back up here. You play him once every 6 games. He's not going to figure it out. But
yeah, he didn't probably play as well as Memphis as you would have liked. Victor Scott the same too. But again, I understand the reasons for that because of everything that they'd gone through. They were so mixed up. So you got to think that hopefully the offseason, had a chance to clear your heads. Hopefully they've had given them some confidence that you're going to play. Just don't worry about it. Just go play. Don't overanalyze things. Don't give them too much information to try to process. Just be the players that you've always been growing up. I think you can make the argument that perhaps the most key guy, if this club is going to be successful in 2025, is Brant Brown, the new hitting coach.
Absolutely, he is. And I think, another big
coming from outside the organization too. So
yes,
he's coming in with a fresh perspective that he hasn't worked with.
That's what I'm saying. I'm intrigued to see the new hitting philosophy and the ideas, because to me, it really seems like this team focused on home runs a lot more than they probably needed to, right? When a lot of times a base hit could have just solved the same basic principle, right? How often did you see this team bunt last year or just move guys over? And when you're struggling to score, why not try to manufacture runs in other ways?
And that's where a guy like Victor Scott II can help you, because he never really got a chance to use his best asset last year, which was his speed.
And I had been
stealing bases.
I had been since day one saying Mason Wynn needs to bat leadoff. You need to get him there. All of a sudden he got there, and look what happens, right? So it's the same thing. If you can get Victor in this lineup at, as Tony used to do, the second leadoff man batting ninth, you've got some serious speed up there behind some of these guys. I think another key piece to this offense this year is Lars Nootbaar, because you're really counting on him and probably Wilson Contreras, right, to be your big power bats it sounds weird to say that Nootbaar is your seasoned veteran, but he is on this club, right? So if Arenado's not here, Nootbaar and Contreras are that 3-4 combination in the lineup that need to be the guys driving in runs.
I think the other thing that we kind of talked about, Nootbaar too, he's one of the three guys, as we mentioned a minute ago, that did not agree to a contract before the arbitration deadline a few days ago. He, Palante, and Donovan all filed for arbitration, and the Cardinals have adopted a philosophy in recent years of, if you file, you go to the trial, and that they don't settle. The exception to that, and hopefully it happens with both Donovan and Nootbaar, is if they can work out an agreement on a multi-year contract, then they would be able to do that and not avoid the hearing, because nobody wants to go to a hearing. I mean, those are just not productive in any way. Helsley's had that experience in the past. It wasn't good. Wasn't good with Tyler O'Neill. We've seen it with some of the other guys over the years, that they've got to try to avoid those hearings.
If I had to guess, Nootbaar and Donovan both, they're trying to sign multi-year deals, and they just couldn't come to an agreement before that. But that doesn't mean they can't come to an agreement still now in this time. I think when you look at somebody like Palante, he's probably, getting told from his agent as well as him that, hey, you relied on me a lot as a starter last year, and it looks like you're going to rely on me a lot this year, so pay me like that top-end starter that I need to be paid. And that, to me, Palante shouldn't be your top-end starter, but that's probably where his leverage is in trying to get more money.
But that shouldn't be where the Cardinals are pinching nickels and dimes. I mean, because if they are trying to cut the payroll, but the salary that those guys, all three of those guys, are going to earn through arbitration for the first time is not going to break the bank on this club. I mean, they've got to be able to have a higher payroll than that.
They can fix their salary issues in one easy way. Well, two actually, but sign someone that the fans care about and win ball games. If the fans are excited and want to come, hey, guess what? They're spending money. You're making more. You can spend more.
It's been a tough winter for the Cardinal fans. I don't think there's any question about it.
Well,
and it's excited as we always get this time of year when you look forward to getting to February, getting to the start of spring training. I just think a lot of fans are saying, until they do something. Until
they do something, yes, right. And I think the reason to be excited is if they're able to move Arenado, these young kids want to play and they're hungry and they're excited. And I think you're going to see a much more, hungry team up here than you did last year, because they're going to be excited and want to earn that spot, right? Because I think then you're going into the season with, really only a couple spots that are kind of like, hey, this is my spot, right? Mason Wynn at shortstop, he's probably the safe bet there. And Wilson probably at first, right? But other than that, there's a lot of room up for grabs, Victor Scott or Michael Ciani. Who's going to win that battle in center field? You assume it's going to be Nootbaar and Walker in left and right, but what's to say that Burleson doesn't continue to hit and force somebody's hand there, right? So
And you look at Donovan playing second, Gorman at third if Arenado's not here. But then what happens to Thomas and JC?
That's what I think is going to be exciting, right? So, like, it's going to come down to all of these guys wanting to play their best to earn a spot to play. And so you can get a lot of different combinations of lineups throughout, which is going to make it exciting. And so I think fans would be excited about that level of baseball.
And the other
watching Arenado jog to first every time isn't going to excite anyone.
Yeah, we went through that along with Molina long enough. I think the interesting thing is, and I think I have the stat correct, I saw it somewhere the other day. If Arenado is not here, the average age of the Cardinals' projected starting lineup, position player wise, is at just over 25 years of age. But the starting average age of the pitching staff, the starting pitching staff, is like 33.
If Arenado's not,
you need to give Quinn Matthews a chance. You need to give Tink Hens a chance. You need to give Michael McGreevy a chance if you're going to truly do an all-in reset.
And I don't understand what more McGreevy needed to do. No. Last year, you give him 2 starts, and he pitched phenomenal in those 2 starts. You don't give him a chance. Instead, we keep running Michaelis out there with a 13.5 ERA that's not doing anything.
He's getting paid because he's making a lot of money. So
but again,
one more year.
And I understand that Michael Ciani played really well and forced a lot of their hands. But again, you want to talk about money, you've invested a lot more in Victor Scott than you have Michael Ciani. So
what I do want to mention one other thing before we get out of here for this edition. There is one other kind of baseball calendar date that happens this week, which a lot of people are going to ignore, but I just still think it can be a significant day. Is Wednesday is the first day of the international signing period for amateur free agents. Obviously, everybody's paying attention to that because of Mr. Sasaki out there in Japan, and whether he's going to go to the Dodgers or the Padres or the Blue Jays. But the Cardinals actually have some guys that they're projected to sign as well, which have could impact the future of this organization. The top guy, according to Baseball America, that they are scheduled to sign on Wednesday is the 16-year-old outfielder from the Dominican Republic, the son of former Major League pitcher Pedro Strop. As a left-hand here that they think has a chance to be a pretty productive player. So we'll watch for him. And if you don't think this is significant, I'll give you 3 names that were international free agent amateur signees last year that are already ranked in the Cardinals' top 25 prospects. And that's a catcher named Raynel Rodriguez, a pitcher named Brunel Franco, and the shortstop named Yariel Padilla. All were free agent international signees last January that are already inside the Cardinals' top 25 prospects. So this is a significant thing for the Cardinals too, and in a way that they can get better with in a hurry in terms of the depth of the organization of those prospects.
And there's a lot of talent to come from there, right? Like you just mentioned. And so anything you can do to bolster the list of prospects that you have, when you get in a situation late in June, if this team's competing for the division, then hey, maybe we need to make a move somewhere, and you got prospects that can allow you to do that. So
they may that's not necessarily be guys that help this club, but you could help, like you said, make a trade or something. So,
yeah.
So, well, the warm up Saturday, Sunday, Monday down at the Ballpark Village and at the Busch Stadium. We know one thing: it's going to be cold because it's always cold. Winter warm up. So stay bundled up, and I'll be curious to see what the turnout's like from fans. And what their reaction is to some of the different sessions that they have.
And we'll get to hear a lot of things. Mo had mentioned at the winter meetings that Walker and Wynn and a lot of these guys have been down at the complex in Jupiter and working with McGee and working with Brant Brown and trying to work through some of these things. So, and working with Okendo. So I'd be curious to see, the update from that a month and a half later of, who's still been doing stuff or who's going to go down early to get in work and just kind of see who's where they should be, right?
And so we'll see if anything happens before that, or if it happens after that, before we get to February 12th and the pitchers and catchers show up in Jupiter, Florida. So, Mike, thanks for the visit. Mike Raines, Rob Raines, STLSportspage.com here on Raines on the Cardinals podcast. Have a great day, everybody.